Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Weekend Prime Time. We begin tonight with some major breaking news coming out of the Middle East, where Israeli officials say that Iran has launched missiles at the country today for the first time since April's ceasefire. Again, scrambling efforts by Donald Trump and regional mediators who were working on trying to strike a deal between the U.S. and Iran. Tonight, air raid sirens were reported across parts of northern Israel, raising fresh concerns that the region could be sliding back towards a broader conflict. Israeli officials say all missiles were intercepted. Just in the last half hour, our White House reporter Jake Traylor reports that a White House official says Trump has, quote, fundamentally miscalculated on Iran and underestimated the willingness of Iran to resume the conflict. MS Now has also confirmed a call did in fact take place between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This, according to a White House official, granted anonymity to share some sensitive details. The call was initiated by President Trump. Of course, all the escalation comes hours after Israel carried out airstrikes hitting civilian areas in the suburbs of Beirut today. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a statement saying that its corresponding strikes were in response to the Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon. In part, it said tonight's operation was solely intended as a warning. Should these acts of aggression continue, future responses will be broader in scope and will encompass all American and Israeli targets throughout the region. Joining us now are Inzamam Rashid in Dubai. He's an MS Now contributor, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor, and Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, MS Now military analyst and retired commander of U.S. Army Corps. It's good to have all of you with us. Jake, I want to start with you actually at the White House. We know this call took place. There has been some anecdotal reporting about the nature of this call and what obviously precipitated, what perhaps Donald Trump was telling the Israeli prime minister in it. Just give us a quick update on the reporting that you have coming out from the White House in terms of what Donald Trump is hoping for this evening, what he's perhaps asking the Israelis to do or not to do in light of today's escalations.
Yeah, look, this feels like a significant moment, and I know it feels like we're saying that every couple of days, but this is really a heightened moment because this is, as you noted, the first time we've seen Iran strike Israel since that shaky ceasefire began in April. I was talking with a couple of White House officials going into the call between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The real key thing that these White House officials were communicating to me was that President Trump wanted to diffuse any potential response from Israel on Iran. And intended to go into that phone call essentially saying to Netanyahu, if you escalate, if you retaliate, if this thing picks back up again, this is going to be increasingly tougher to reach any level of ceasefire. And so one White House official just told me, we don't know this for sure yet, but we can expect in the nature of President Trump to maybe get a Truth Social post giving us some version of a readout later this evening about how that call between the president and Netanyahu went. But another White House official telling me this is a really difficult situation for Trump. And as you read at the top of the show, essentially this White House official said, quote, a fundamental miscalculation from Trump on dealing with Iran. This official went on to say, we've not seen anything the likes of the way Iran behaves. They called it, quote, erratic behavior, and said that the president, as we saw evidence in a lot of that Kristen Welker interview with President Trump that we've been airing throughout the day, the president attempting to say he has the upper hand in the situation. A deal is imminent and going to take place soon. I think that's the 7th or 8th time the president has said a version of that over the past 100 days. And then hours later, seeing the significant strikes from Iran on Israel, this White House official was arguing it just shows how far Iran's willing to go here. The president was very frustrated going into the call with Netanyahu, I'm told, and likely attempted in any way to get him to not retaliate on Iran. And we expect to get more of that readout momentarily.
General Hertling, I want to ask you about what you read as the fundamental miscalculations here, as Jake Traylor just spelled them out, but then also just some of what we're watching from the president tonight. You know, he's reached out to reporters, gotten on the phone with them, and telegraphed to reporters what he was going to say to figures like Prime Minister Netanyahu before he actually even got the chance to do that. And I guess my basic question is if that is normal for a president to talk publicly about the discussions he's hoping to have with key allies and figures in the middle of an incredibly tenuous, chaotic and concerning situation. If that reads to you as sort of part of fundamentally and strategically what's gone wrong here.
It is, Antonio, and I'll say there's a lot of things that we're seeing that have never been done before. One of the things is discussing what you're going to say with key allied partners during a major operation, and basically, in some cases, even chastising them and suggesting you're going to berate them for doing the things that they've done. You know, when leaders plan operations, the normal approach is you look at a lot of things beyond striking a target. They look at the likely reactions of adversaries, allies, partners, domestic audiences. Iran publicly declared Beirut a red line. They said in the initial memorandum of understanding that striking Beirut and Hezbollah would cause them to retaliate. Israel struck anyway. That doesn't necessarily mean the strike was wrong, but it means planners, military planners and administration planners on both sides should have probably anticipated some form of Iranian response when Israel struck. It gets back to the phrase that I've used often on this show: the enemy gets a vote. And in this case, Iran just cast its vote. We should be planning what comes next. And when you see the distinct differences between the end state objectives between Israel, they want to destroy Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran and prevent them from taking any kind of action against them. President Trump and the United States has now gotten into a pattern of saying we purposely want to eliminate the nuclear threat from Iran and open the straits. Those two objectives are counterintuitive and counterproductive to each other. So if you see Israel continuing to strike targets outside of Beirut against Hezbollah, you know that the president is not going to be happy because it's going to thwart his plans to execute what he sees as a potential peace deal.
Inzamam, let's take a step back for a moment and just kind of walk us through how we got here, right? Because to the general's point, he said Iran, has a say in what has been happening in the region. And obviously, we are focusing tonight on Iran's response to Israel because of the strikes it carried out in Beirut. But this did not just happen in a vacuum. There have been a series of strikes. Even the U.S. military carried out strikes in Iran in recent weeks. The Israeli military has been carrying out strikes inside Lebanon. Hezbollah has been firing back against Israel. So this is not, we use the word ceasefire, but there really hasn't been a true ceasefire since it has been announced.
No, and it's been building up to a moment like this, I think it's fair to say, guys, given what's happened over the last 10 days. As you mentioned, that tit-for-tat fighting between the US and Iran and the ongoing fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, particularly the Israeli strikes inside of Lebanon and the Hezbollah strikes into northern Israel. But remember, we've had those US strikes, particularly into southern Iran at military sites on the coastline of Iran, and then the Iranian retaliation, which has specifically gone into countries like Kuwait and Bahrain. Earlier this week, Kuwait International Airport was struck, where a couple of people had died and dozens had been injured. As a result, we saw that some targets in Bahrain were struck as a result of Iranian rocket fire as well. So this tit-for-tat fighting has been growing over the last 10 days. But clearly what's been going on inside Lebanon, as the general mentioned, has been a red line for Iran from the very beginning. And today, clearly, the targeting of Beirut was too much for Iran just to sit back and let it happen. They wanted to retaliate as a result. It's something that they've said all along. And actually today we were getting signals from Iran that they were prepared to target Israel as a result. So I just want to very briefly read you what Mohammad Ghalibaf, who is in fact Iran's parliamentary speaker and the man who is essentially leading the negotiations for Iran. This is what he said earlier today. He said the naval blockade against the Iranian nation and America's green light today to the Zionist regime turn American and regime bases and assets in the region into legitimate targets. The hand of our armed forces is open as always. It's that last line which was really giving a signal that the Iranian military, the IRGC, was very much prepared to attack because of what's been going on inside of Lebanon. And once those attacks took place in southern Beirut, clearly it was enough for Iran to come back and fire rockets into Israel this evening.
Inzamam, what can you tell us about how our allies in the region are, or how they are responding to developments today?
Well, I've had a couple of conversations with some senior people within the Gulf governments over the last couple of hours, ever since these Iranian attacks inside Israel started. And there is concern tonight amongst the Gulf countries, not least within Kuwait and Bahrain, who, as I've mentioned, seen a fair share of their attacks over the last 10 days or so. In fact, airspace in Kuwait, Bahrain and Qatar tonight has been shut as a result of these Iranian strikes inside of Israel. But the likes of the UAE and Saudi Arabia will also be concerned, because remember, the Gulf countries have very much been at the heart of this conflict over the last 3 months and a bit, ever since this conflict started, because the Iranian retaliation has been towards the Gulf nations. The UAE here has bared more missiles and drones than any other country in this whole war from Iran. And so there will be a huge concern tonight. If this escalates, if this goes beyond than just the tit-for-tat fighting, then very much the Gulf countries could be embroiled in this conflict once again. And that would impact them not just economically, as it has done over the last few months, but also militarily as well. We know that civilian infrastructure has been targeted, nuclear sites have been targeted, gas facilities across this region as well, and that will be a big concern for many of the Gulf countries this evening.
Jake Traylor, we'll let you get back to reporting and let us know if you learn anything new. Everyone else is sticking around. We're back with more on the breaking news after a quick break. This is the Weekend Primetime on MS Now.